Makes This Better YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about triggers, but I want to talk about them in a specific light and how I see them being handled by most, like the majority, most people out in the world, on the internet and, wherever. If you watch a lot of psychology content, this isn't going to be necessarily like mind-blowingly new concepts for you. But a lot of times people will know things logically, but not put them into practice. And so if you know something logically that you're supposed to be doing in order to improve your life, but you're not doing it, it's just the same as not knowing it at all. Even if you have this knowledge, it's important to recognize whether or not you're putting it into practice. And that is this idea that triggers are your job. Every trigger is like a task on your to-do list. And this doesn't mean, I'm not saying that you need to sit around all day doing like therapy work or doing meditation, or every single time anything happens, you have to like run to your room and like not come out until you figured it out. Not like that, not that extreme. That's not required for you to make progress with this stuff. But I want to talk about the few, really just like one or two things that I've seen a lot in mainstream society that, among people who don't really study psychology, don't really think about it, aren't in any sort of therapeutic process. These are a couple of things I've seen. Let me turn my speaker off here. Okay, so the first thing is that there's two sides to this coin. The first thing is that people believe that when I'm triggered, it means that you're bad and wrong and you need to do something about it. So, this is the whole idea that this is why everyone's so upset right now about cancel culture, and, everyone's offended by everything, and, a lot of people complain about that stuff, that whole culture that's happening right now. And there is an element of truth to that, and we'll get to the rest of it in a minute. But the element of truth is, it is true that when you are triggered, when you're offended, when you are hurt, when you are upset, when something triggers strong negative emotion in you, I'm not talking about like you see someone get shot and you cry. Like that's a natural human reaction. I'm talking about when someone says something and it sends you flying into a rage, or something happens in your outside world, your day-to-day life outside of you, that compels you to feel really low self-esteem or feel really a lot of scarcity, like you need to like cling, or anything that triggers any strong negative reaction in you is a trigger, right? Anything. Doesn't matter if it's another person, a situation, an experience, something you saw, something you heard, anything that triggers a strong, sudden negative reaction in you is triggering you, right? So that means that whatever that thing is, dredged up, or not dredged up, but it poked at something in your subconscious, right? That's the whole thing we talk about in the workbook and in the school and everything, and all over this channel, is that with triggers, something's being poked at in your subconscious. So a trigger, no matter how far removed it seems from you, no matter how much it seems like it's someone else's fault, someone else needs to fix it, someone else, something else, etc., it's always about you. Otherwise, it would not be a trigger for you, right? So people get really triggered by what I'm saying right now because they think that means that other people should be allowed to be abusive and treat them however they want, and they're not allowed to have boundaries and all this stuff. It doesn't mean any of that. If someone outside of you is triggering you and their behavior is abusive or neglectful or just generally negative or whatever, it doesn't mean that they are right in doing those things. And it doesn't mean that you're supposed to applaud them and let them keep hurting you or anything like that. It's nothing about condoning the outside world. This is where people get confused because, I had an article where I talked about like waste and environmental stuff being a huge trigger for me recently, like seeing people wasting large amounts of things, like wasting food, seeing like pictures of landfills just full of like unused plastic and, dumpsters full of food that no one has eaten, walking into like a convenience store and just seeing everything in just disposable one-time use plastics. That has become very much of a trigger for me that I've been working with. And, just thinking of all the ways how things could be done differently and how overwhelming it is. And there's, the powerlessness element to that. And so what needs to happen, it's not that the world is correct and I need to just shut up and accept it, but it's also not that I need to blame those people doing that and shame those people and tell them to stop so that I can feel better. It's not that either. So it's not that they're right in what they're doing. There is a better way. There does need to be a better way and all that. And that's a progression that has to happen over time. That's a collective evolution thing. But as soon as I start to believe, I slip into that belief that trigger, that reaction I'm having of like rejection or sadness or anger or you want to fight, as soon as I start to believe that has nothing to do with me and that it's not my responsibility to figure out what's going on there, I cut myself off from growth completely. The growth is done. There's no more happening. And that's the sticking point that a lot of people are in. They think that when something triggers them, it means nothing about them and they don't have to do anything. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to feel into it. They don't have to do any work to resolve that trigger. And so they're cutting themselves off from all that subconscious information that trigger is alluding to. Going back to that example of mine with the seeing all the waste and like can't control it, there's just so much of it and how that's a trigger for me. That's actually alluding to a particular issue of mine around loss of control and the inability to create a boundary. So I've had many experiences in my life where I felt that I could not control anything that was happening, and it's experienced as what they call an incoming boundary violation. So other people's actions, behaviors, what they're saying, what they're doing, just this onslaught onto me and feeling like I cannot create any buffer between me and other people as they're doing that. So incoming boundary violation, right? So if I didn't look into that and find out what was really going on there, and if I hadn't studied psychology and boundary issues and attachment issues and all that, I'd have no clue that my reaction to that waste and the environmental stuff was actually a reflection of a boundary issue that I needed to resolve in myself. You see what I'm saying? So we have all these people all over the world going into these triggers day after day after day after day, and they really think that the only issue is what they're seeing on the outside. They really think that the only issue is other people being bad, doing bad things, being evil, and if they just stopped, then I'd stop being triggered. But that's not the case. So that's the first thing, and I can already see this video is going to be longer than I anticipated, but that's okay, because I want to get to this next thing. The flip side to this is the whole cultural movement behind, creating distance, basically lack of responsibility for other people. So, like, if you're having emotions, that's your problem. If I upset you, it's your problem. Um, you know, if you're triggered, it's because you're stupid and I'm smart. Um, Basically, anyone having any sort of emotion is stupid and wrong, and because I'm acting superior and not showing emotionality, that makes me smart and correct. This is the flip side of the delusion, right? And this is especially destructive because this side of the delusion is so that the first thing I just mentioned about, thinking that it's the outside that's wrong and it has nothing to do with you, that's a personal responsibility issue. So that's going to affect your personal growth, and it's going to make you just kind of stunted and always dealing with the same issues because you're never looking at them. The second thing that I just mentioned, where it's like, I upset you, that's your fault, that's because you're misunderstanding, it's because you're stupid and overly emotional and overly reactive. That whole movement of people, they, it's it's a compassion issue. So it's also, here's the fun fact, it's also a personal responsibility issue for them. So they cannot acknowledge their impact. It's almost like they're denying any connection to other people. So you see this a lot with people who have what they would call avoidant attachment styles, especially people on the far end of that spectrum who are very avoidant. Probably experienced a lot of uncomfortable stuff in their childhood where they just wanted to escape people and, lose that connection so that they don't have to deal with other people. You'll see this behavior a lot in those folks where it's like, if you're like sad, if you're crying, I'm gonna leave the room, it's not my job, like to just stay away until you're fine again. Like that very like stay back, I didn't do anything, that's your problem. That sort of theme is like the flip side to the first group, right? Because the first group is saying, you did this to me, you changed, you fix this, like you're the problem, you're the reason for my being triggered. And the people on the other end of it, and this is happening one-on-one, it's happening culturally, it's happening all over the place, right? It's like a microcosm, a macrocosm, and internally, right, with parts work, there are internal parts of you who can be having this same conflict. So that's important to know. If it's happening on the outside, it's happening on the inside. So this second group, like I'm saying, they're responding by being like, you're stupid, your problems aren't my problems. Even people who are kind of nice about it, they're still just like, if I upset you, that's not my problem. Like, it's literally all your job. It's all on you. You don't deserve any help. You can't ask for help. You just need to get yourself better, right? So the lack of responsibility there is basically what these people believe is that when they hurt or upset other people, they do not need to take any responsibility for that. And it's just a free-for-all. You can do anything, you can say anything, as long as you believe that you're like up on your high horse, you're correct. If you're the right one, then it doesn't matter how many people you hurt and yell at and dismiss and ignore, because it's all about just being right. So it's like, well, if I'm right and I'm superior because I'm not having emotions, I'm not triggered, then that's the end of it, right? And so I never, ever, ever have to look at myself either. You can see how these are flip sides to the same coin, because both groups are saying, I never have to look at myself. They're both just pointing fingers and saying, you're the problem, right? So this is two different ways to mismanage triggers, whether it's your trigger or someone else's. Just because it's someone else's doesn't mean that all you have to do is walk away and ignore them or tell them they're stupid and wrong. You know, just because it's not your trigger doesn't mean you have no responsibility at all in the situation. So long story short, when triggers come up, that is a task on your to-do list at some point. Doesn't mean you have to do it right away, although sometimes it's easiest to just do it right away. And something needs to be processed or acknowledged. So there's either an internal conflict, there's a trauma that literally just needs catharsis. So that's, you know, when we do things like just straight up processing work, you sit down, you go into meditation, whatever needs to come up comes up. Usually people cry. That's like the main thing that needs to happen. And we'll talk, I think I talk a little bit about like the function of crying, what crying exists for, and why it's important to incorporate that into your processing work. I mean, it kind of is, sometimes it is the processing work, like it's the whole thing. I think I talk about that in, where was it? It was the last workshop I did in the school, which was, oh, I think it was graduating from factions, it's called. So yeah, triggers are pointing to where you're going to get the most self-information. So if you want your life to get better and you want to feel happier, the number one place you're going to find the information for how to do that is within the least comfortable place you can imagine looking, ironically, which is in the triggers themselves. So that's it. That's all I want to say today. If you haven't subscribed here, make sure to do that. Check out the school. We are several weeks in, a couple months in. That's going well. We have monthly workshops. I have a workshop coming up on, gosh, what day? What day am I doing it? I believe I said the 17th. I'm so bad with dates, but I think I said the 17th. So that's next Saturday. I'm going to be talking about the physiology of shadow work. So how the physical body plays into your emotional processing work and why you can't just do mental and emotional stuff without incorporating your physical body if you want like a full big picture maturation process, maturity process into real self-empowerment. You have to incorporate the body. There are ways to do that. In my opinion, they're very underrated, not talked about enough. And so I'm going to be talking about that. To learn more about that, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll send out a link before I do that. And that's it. I will see you in the next video.